Welcome to the William C. Bonatti Libraries. What is plagiarism? My name is Rhonda Kitchens and I am your faculty librarian. There's a lot of different ways to approach this topic, and I'm going to try to approach it in a way that's in context with Big Bend Community College. Also, our plagiarism or similarity checker, turn it in, and ideas about common knowledge and how it might apply to us. A little bit, so little, about citation and documentation, and also where to get help. On many of these, I will have things that you would need to view on the outside of this particular presentation, and I have the links linked here in this document and also in the page that this is in. One of the first things to kind of realize is that plagiarism has a context. Here's the American Psychological Association's 2022 definition of what plagiarism is to the APA. It's an act of presenting words, ideas, or images of another as your own. It denies authors or creators of content the credit they are due. Whether deliberate or unintentional, plagiarism violates ethical standards in scholarship. And that's a really important line, whether deliberate or unintentional. So many acts of plagiarism are actually accidental. And by learning some of the rules of the road, those can be prevented. This will be the Big Bend Community College Student Code of Conduct Violation, WAC 132R-04-057. These statements are often updated. There may be a new one coming up, in fact. The college may impose sanctions against a student who attempts to commit, aids, abets, incites, encourages, or assists another person to commit an act of misconduct. And number one, academic dishonesty, cheating, plagiarism, fabrication. You should be able to read this all completely on your own, but again, while we see that plagiarism can sometimes have different definitions, this particular definition comes with some very heavy consequences. Turnitin is the system that we use in conjunction with Canvas in order to check similarity plagiarism on items that are turned in by students and users. Now, this isn't supposed to be punitive. Actually, you should be able to look at it in advance so that you can fix your work before you turn it in. I'm not going to go through a whole video on that particular process, but I'm going to give you that video so that you can review it. I'm going to go into Turnitin and what it sort of looks like in case you haven't seen it before. And you may not realize there are so many examples of plagiarism, and actually Turnitin can be an excellent resource in making sure that you don't do that. So I'm going to go to their page and show you some of these. Clone, control, plus C, control, copy, recycle, and aggregator. Aggregator is going to shock you. Maybe clone as well. So let's get to those and see what they look like. This Turnitin page has several different examples, and it's well worth your time to take a look at them. This particular spectrum has 10 different types. Let's look at clone first of all. So we have the source text, since discovery of non-indigenous people. Oh, look, it's exactly the same. There's absolutely no changes. And in most cases, we really do understand what that would be. Control C. It has significant portions of the text and not a lot of transitions, paraphrases, or summaries. It also doesn't have quotation marks. Let's move on. Find and replace. You'll see this may be something where you use parts of it and there's not a lot of original work. This is an attempt at a remix, but it can still be picked up because it's using entire sections of the words. All of these are going to come up on the similarity report, and you as a student will be able to view those as well before you actually hit the submit button. This is recycle. This has, again, some of the words kind of in the same order, not so far apart. And it may be that you've thought that this is good, that you've summarized a portion of this, and it's okay, and you've paraphrased. And maybe you use synonyms and replace some of the words while retaining the sentence structure. No, you're going to have to do a little bit more work than that. So make the time to kind of go through all of this student work, how it looks, the mashup. This will also help you understand, of course, the similarity reports when you see them, to understand what you did. Because in some cases you may think this was fine. This worked out quite well for me. And it wasn't. So take the time to go over this piece. Your big weapons or your tools against this will be summary, paraphrasing, and quotes, and attributing the work. So make sure you're aware that there are ways around this look-alike text mashups. Something you use that's actually not there. Yeah, sometimes people create fake citations. And the aggregator, which is when there's a citation after everything, which is a lack of, you may need assistance with some writing ability. It may be that this particular things could be mentioned at the end. And also it means you're missing some transitions and sort of words of your own that put together the main ideas. This is one of the areas where our writing center comes in handy, and also a chance probably to talk to your instructor as well. And here, the retweet where it's kind of the same. And let's go to the other area. Because plagiarism has expanded and it's actually sort of different. Did you know that you could plagiarize yourself? That's right, it's called self-plagiarism. Student collusion, this word for word. And then self-plagiarism is sometimes kind of harmless, like, well, I'm working on this topic in speech, why don't I work on this topic in English? Or I worked on it a few years ago. I did really well with this in high school. Don't do that. It's possible it will show up and Turnitin. It's a 100% version of yourself, and your professor or instructor will know. And it's also possible that you'll just by looking at your different resources and things, that your instructor is going to pick up on this pretty fast. But you know what? In some cases, and this is why your communication with your instructor and professors is so very, very, very important. Sometimes it's okay. Sometimes a person may say, you know, you can use that topic in this speech class. Yes, you can use this topic in your history class. Just ask to make sure that they know that you're using this particular thing. This is a communication option. And a lot of plagiarism actually is an issue with plagiarism is a communication with the person who's grading your paper and the person you're working with. If you feel like something may not be well done, well represented, or well attributed, you don't understand transitions, there's all these different points where the best thing you can possibly do is discuss it with the writing center, a librarian, or your instructor, because inadvertent plagiarism is a thing, but the consequences can also be very stiff and tragic. So use your resources to deflect that type of work. That said, you don't have to go far to find online paraphrasers that promise to help you beat Turnitin, Plagiarism X, and all the other plagiarism checkers out on the market. You can beat them. Quillbot happens to be one of those, and it is a premium service, and it does have an essential part that's free. But I hope you can see now that we've gone through the Turnitin part that actually this particular piece, it does put you in peril as well. First of all, you don't see that it has any quotes, it doesn't have any attributions using citations, and you can see clearly it's used entire portions of this, and as we'll talk about in a couple of slides, it really doesn't address the issue of common knowledge. You'll need to cite things that aren't common knowledge, and probably that flour was a staple of Mesoamerican cuisine is probably not common knowledge in this particular space in your starting 2 years at Big Bend Community College. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I want you to see there are some things out there that will help you paraphrase, but be aware it's helping you and everyone else paraphrase in the same way, which ends up showing up on Turnitin and other places as well. This may not be the best way to go. It may be a way for you to look at your work and you could use it as a tool, but be aware it's not a copy and paste option, and in fact unless you buy the premium pieces, you and everyone else who use the free service will end up with the same paragraph. So beware. So Turnitin student use. I'm not going to go through this, but Donnie Arnett put together this wonderful piece on how to use Turnitin to review your paper. Because yes, Turnitin is a tool that you can make corrections before your final submission. You know what? You may have made some very inadvertent errors, and this is a great place to catch it. And if you don't understand why this occurred, ask your instructor, go to the writing center, because we all at different times I've looked at and discussed with students what these particular things that showed up in the report are. It's a great discussion place. Did I mention one of the plagiarism killers is communication? That's right. Talk to us. So let's talk about common knowledge. Common knowledge, in a way, while plagiarism has some kind of basic areas where it's the same no matter where you go, where you work, or what group you're working with, or your profession, common knowledge can be a little bit, let's call it squishier, flexible, but probably not in your first formative years here at Big Bend Community College unless you're nursing or something of that nature. So it's good for us to talk about this because, again, this is a great place for communication. If you're in nursing, there may be a set of common things all of you know that say, I don't know. And you know what? That would make it common knowledge for me, and I would need to cite it because I don't know. But you, within the context of your classroom, within your profession, having that type of conversation, it's going to be different. So, information most people know without researching, verifying, or looking up, information shared by a cultural or national group, and however, what may be common knowledge in one culture, nation, academic discipline, or peer group may not be in another. In that case, please cite it. So, let's look at this as common knowledge practice. To cite or not to cite. The sky is blue. The sky is red. Generally speaking, the sky is blue is absolutely common knowledge. The sky is red is slightly sketchy in nature, so you would really need to cite that or explain it further. Next, the capital of the United States is the White House. The official residence of the President of South Korea is the Blue House. In the United States, Big Bend Community College, definitely for your next 2 years, the capital of the United States is the White House, does not need to be cited. We know this. We don't have to research it or look it up. But did you have to look it up if the president lives in the capital or official residence in South Korea is in the Blue House? No. If you were in Asia, which one of these would you cite? We'd like to think perhaps this is common knowledge, but it may or may not be. But in this case, if you're in a different place and or a different culture, you might look at it a different way. Americans celebrate birthdays on the day they are born. South Korea uses 3 different birthday systems and shares this multiple birthday cultural practice with Japan, Vietnam, and some other Asian countries. Which do you need to cite? Here at Big Bend Community College, South Korea uses, yes, the second birthday system. That's not common to us, but it's quite common in other places. So if you were in those other places, you would not need to cite the place where it's common knowledge. Next, long COVID-19 is caused by damage to the vagus nerve. Long COVID is affecting many people. If you pick the first one, you're absolutely correct. At this point, there's not a great wealth of common knowledge on the cause of long COVID, and this nerve particular thing is an aspect that probably needs some more research. So absolutely, you're going to want to cite this. At this point, this particular thing is true. Maybe last year it wasn't. We just started. We didn't know what long COVID was or how long it might be. So this has become a part of common knowledge. It didn't start out that way, but now has become. So understanding common knowledge is the practice of it is what you don't have to look up or find. And if you have a question, cite it. Now, as I was working on this, I discovered something amusing. Because if you notice on all of my slides, I have a little citation down here, but I found out there are so many places that use MIT's common knowledge content that's on their page. I used a part of it, but I put it in quotes because I used it as was. I even brought in the bullet points as they appeared, but on the bottom, I put where it was from, and it was just a portion of the page, not the entire page. And also, I kind of wanted to quote it because they did have better words, but I also thought it had like more authority. This is another reason you might want to cite something, by the way. It has a great deal of authority, perhaps, to quote from MIT versus my own personal feelings on the topic. if you see what I mean there, right? So as I was looking, I found that all these other places pretty much used it exactly. So let's look at some of those places and what they did. Sometimes you may not be working in a course that requires you to have a standard look for your resources you've used, a works cited page, a bibliography, references in the case of APA, and you may be using a different type of thing like a slideshow and things like that. And sometimes the documentation styles don't have as hard and fast rules for things of that nature. So here we see how this phrase, as you see, this is pretty much what I used and quoted in my particular piece, but notice what they did here was this. I used a form of APA. Now, first of all, if you have, ask your professor what their expectations are on this. Many times they will have it, sometimes it's slide by slide, sometimes it's an in-text citation, or they will give you the name of the piece and also let you know what they want. Again, I can't say enough. Communication is the way to deal with this particular thing because you'd like to know what they would use. In this case, this is, I think, isn't .edu yet. They're just using a link to show you what they did and where it came from. So in this case, I feel like they gave the props to MIT, and this looks excellent. Though, well, it's kind of a block quote. In some cases, it might should have had some quotes, but I think it's pretty clear that these are all from different places. Okay, this is a page by an editor and writer. You could probably pay this person to go over your dissertation and things of that nature, which are very, very expensive. Okay, and this is how this person used it. They put it, I would say this is more of a block quote. Sometimes a quote that's this long, especially in APA, it would be like 60 words or over, maybe 40, something like that. It's going to vary per citation and documentation style. But it's set in, and I know it's from someplace else. And we have, according to article, an academic integrity from MIT, and they put a reference to the link. So that person did attribute it, and probably in the place of a blog, that might this is on an education site, and they use parts of the MIT statement, but it's spread out in some different ways. They've listed it more, but in a way they kind of use their bullet points, but then kind of expanded on it. And this is how they managed it to show and honor who it was from. This is a simple web page, and you can see here they're giving attribution to plagiarism.org, which apparently has a lot of wonderful information should you choose to also go there. And this part on you don't need to cite common knowledge, yeah, they recognize, they do take part of the bullet points and they recognize where they got it from, and they also show where to get it. Here they do sort of, it may be MLA or an old version of APA, but one of the important things is stay consistent within what you're doing and make sure that you attribute it in a way that is recognized by the person who grades your paper. And doing this, it wasn't my goal to confuse you. I want you to be aware that different people will grade your citations and documentation in different ways. One of the best ways to discover what that is usually the rubric, the assignment, or asking your instructor. My best thing, like when you come to me as a librarian, I try to work with you at the highest possible level of the the most precise professor you'll ever have. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the citation systems that you will use to honor the work of others. One of the greatest changes you might have made in terms of working on academic work is that in citing others, you're building your own reputation, you're threading together the great work of scholarship and building a reputation and showing how things are connected. And you are graded or judged in a way that is positive about that. That is not considered you're having to find things or your ideas are less. Your ideas are built and become more beautiful with research, first of all, and wider, more diverse, and of course will continue to grow because research should be a lifetime pursuit. Meantime, Let's talk about this very briefly. There's different types of text citation styles. So if you found like, oh, this person wants Chicago, this person wants MLA, this person wants APA, I do not understand these things and why I need to do them, understand that these citation styles usually go with different disciplines. MLA, Modern Language Association, usually in the humanities. In our case, it'll probably only show up maybe in CSS, ENGL 101, 102. I'm not sure how much further out it will go. Other places like sciences and also nursing will be using APA, American Psychological Association. That usually is in the social sciences, though nursing in some cases will use AMA, the American Medical Association, which I believe is one of the easier citation styles of them all, but currently I don't believe it's in use on Big Ben's campus. Next, footnote style. That's going to be Chicago University, and that's going to probably show up in your history classes. In fact, it shows up so much, our Writing Center has guides for each and every one of these things. So make sure you come by and pick them up, or go to the Writing Center and download them and use them right away. It was sort of difficult to try to determine the trail to go on this particular thing, as they're kind of layers, like the idea of research and what you bring in and paraphrasing, summary and whatnot. Go with it and what really works for you, and know that all this information is things you can easily get back to, and every page is cited. So your main way to elude Turnitin. Nah, that's not true. You're trying to elude plagiarism. You're trying to award persons who've done their work. You're trying to be ethical. That's exactly what you're trying to do. So, quote, summarize, and paraphrase. That's the 3 simple ways to avoid it. And these 2 things will still need to have quoted. You still need to attribute your work. If it's not yours, paraphrasing it does not make it yours. Summarizing it does not make it yours. And further, in the academic tradition, the value of other people's research is high, so you absolutely want that in your paper to show what you've read, what you've done, and what you've researched. It's actually a very beautiful and wondrous thing. So, 3 simple ways to avoid plagiarism. Quote. When you quote, you do reference the original source. The text is produced in the exact length in original text, and you put quotes. You can sometimes, when you drop out pieces, use ellipses during those gaps that you do not include. Always check your citation style. I believe in APA specifically, that is absolutely true. Summarize. That's right, it was really huge, but you can make it very tiny. Use none of the words. Use a sentence. Actually, this is good practice in general to be able to understand, kind of it helps you sometimes with your deep reading. Paraphrase is where you sort of use it, and this is a place where sometimes people get in trouble because they think just changing some synonyms and some words or conjunctions or prepositions will fix it all. And the answer is no. If you're going to do that, you might as well quote. To paraphrase is really quite different, and sometimes your whole paragraph will be a type of paraphrase, and you may just cite it at the end of the paragraph instead of the individual pieces at the end if you're using it in text citation style. When I say this, I realize this may not be entirely clear to all of you what I'm saying. So when you hit this place, again, communication is one of the major ways to avoid plagiarism. Ask your writing center, ask your librarian, ask the person who's going to be grading your paper. I'm not going to go into each of these, and I want you to look at them. This 15 minutes will save your academic integrity. I happen to love scribbers very fast. This happens to be Jessica. Yes, I have watched them enough to know this is Jessica. Look, 3 minutes, 3 minutes. I think this one's 3 minutes as well. And she provides these very fast, very easy to understand illustrations. And I'd like you to enjoy that as much as I do. And they may be blocked on campus use because they may be, well, it's just blocked. We'll just go with that story. But you can still get to them on YouTube. And make sure you do. I have these links here. I'm telling you, 15 minutes that will save your academic integrity right here. Okay, further along at the end, and I've said this so much, need help, questions. One of the strongest ways to avoid plagiarism is to ask, is this correct? Is this right? Should I do this way? Should I do it another way? This is where you determine those things. Absolutely use your writing center. Also, feel free to